Um, Now that we've spoken about this a bit, I want to touch upon it. The PR process in Canada, right? You did touch upon it. You said it was an easier way to establish myself or get a PR, Canada, compared to other countries, especially the US. What are the steps involved? How easy it was or has been, and how long does it take? And with all the not specific to Canada, with all the horror stories we're hearing about how, there's an anti-immigrant drive across the globe, do you think you're noticing some patterns or some themes in Canada to that effect?
The PR process itself is a lengthy process for sure. So I actually had a look at my express entry points before coming to Canada. So the way that it works is that you put in some basic information about yourself, the education that you've had, the years of experience, if you've given an English proficiency test. Based on that, they assign you a score. And then every month, or sometimes even more often, they do a draw. So then they have a cutoff score. So, for example, if the cutoff score is 460 and your points were based on your personal profile, they were about 470, then you made the cut and then you get an invitation to apply for Canadian PR. Then, of course, you have to provide documentation of your education, work experience, police certificates, the usual. Once you've submitted the application, they process it, review it, and if they're comfortable that you're going to be a good addition to the country, then they issue your PR card. Once you have your PR card, then you're in that race towards your citizenship. So you have to complete about 1,000 days in Canada, living within Canada, and then you're eligible to apply for your passport. So yeah, end to end, it takes a few years, more than a few years. And of course, like processing times recently have been pretty bad. It takes about, like, some people I've seen there, if like once they get their invitation to apply, they put in the application, they're able to get their PR card within a few months. For some people, it could be like 2 years. So one of my friends, if I were to give an example, she's been waiting on her application for 2 years now. So there's no set timeline to it. Sometimes it could take longer, sometimes it could take less than that. So of course, I mean, it gets you in that queue, but you don't know how long you're going to be in that queue. But if I look at the process for UK or if I look at the process for US, I still felt that this is a relatively more stable process. Things are changing now, though. So Canada has changed a lot of their policies. Even the student intake has now become so strict that you see less students coming in. The numbers have gone down a bit. A little bit of that is also that anti-immigrant sentiment. But I think Canada's problem was not just the anti-immigrant sentiment, it's also their economy was kind of getting a hit because a lot of people were taking the unofficial route towards Canada, so they had to counter that with very strict policies. Having said that, I still feel, of course, there's always two kinds of people in any country. There's people who really value the immigrants and know that they're contributing towards the economy, contributing towards the country meaningfully. And then, of course, you have the other group, which are like, oh, why are these people coming and taking our jobs? I mean, jobs are up for grabs. So it's about the better person who gets the job, not immigrant versus
Thank you.
non-immigrant.
Thank you.
Um, so yeah, I mean, there's always going to be that yin yang. It's just making your way through it.
This whole PR process, right? Do normally students apply for the PR process beforehand, or students normally come on a student visa and then work towards the PR card or PR process?
So if you're coming to Canada for the first time and you haven't had that process started before, you usually come on a student visa. Of
Hmm.
course, for that, you need to have an acceptance letter from a university. So when I got my acceptance letter, I applied for a Canadian visa. And then once you get the visa, then you apply for your study permit, which allows you to basically study in Canada.
Hmm.
And then the first time that you enter Canada is where you get the study permit document, the physical document. And that allows you to basically study in Canada for whatever time frame your degree is for. Once you complete your studies, you're eligible for a postgraduate work permit. Depending on the duration of your degree, it could be between 1 to 3 years, or I think it's
Right.
2 to 3 years.
Hmm.
And during being on that work permit, usually what people do is they put in the application for their PR. So you could do that at any point in time, but usually because the cutoff points are so high now, people wait for about a year so that they have a year of Canadian experience working in Canada. That really gives you like some extra points. And once you have that, you're eligible to basically put in your application for express entry. Um, Now it's tricky in the sense that if you only have an undergrad, you don't have enough points to put you over the edge to get the invitation to apply. So a lot of students that I know now are trying to learn French. Um, so
Ah,
they're
I
like
see.
different buckets of Canadian immigration. So you have a federal skilled workers program, which is for basically people who've had mostly international experience and not particularly experience in Canada. Then there's a Canadian experienced class draw, which is basically for people like me who've come here, studied in Canada, or like not even studied, like worked in Canada. So you have
Mm,
the Canadian experience. So you have
mm.
points for that. Then there's some provincial streams. So if you're working in a company and the company is giving you sponsorship or something like extra from the province, that we really need this person, so you could get some extra points for that. And then there's some language draws. So, for example, Canada, the second language here is French. There are not too many French speaking people. There are some provinces like Quebec that have more um, French speaking people. Um, so for these kind of draws, because there are not too many people applying to that, because not everybody knows French, the scores are also lower. So if you learn French and you're able to pass a proficiency test with enough grade, like enough band, you will be able to be eligible for that particular draw. So a lot of people are learning French for that matter, because if you don't have enough points, then it really puts you in a different bucket where the scores are still lower.
I
So
see.
there's
So
different
basic,
ways that you could go about it.
but that also means there's a lot of learning or financial commitment or work involved in any of
It
these
is.
routes if you want to
It
go through
is.
the right route. From your personal on ground experience, has Toronto turned out to be how it was marketed to you when you were moving here, being the financial hub of Canada, being the economic center, downtown being one of the best areas to live in? Has it turned out to be that way?
Yes and no. Financial center, definitely. There's a lot more opportunities here, but it also means there's a lot more competition. UFT is based in Toronto. The commerce degree and like MBA definitely is a very good program. So a lot of people do that. So for example, when I was graduating, the cohort for MBAs was, I think, more than 200 people,
It's
if
quite a
like on
bit.
the shy side, right? And then my master's was like a cohort of 40 people. So every year you have so many graduates who want to work in financial services, who want to work in banks, and there's only so many jobs. The competition here is much, much, much worse than other provinces, I would say,
Mm.
especially for like banking and financial services. But it does live up to that dream of, okay, if you want to really be in Canada and if you want to work in financial services, this is the place to be. Um, in terms of like living in downtown, I definitely love that. But there are a few challenges to that, of course. Economically, I think people in Canada have not been doing that great for a few years. That's what I've heard, that Toronto has changed so much since after the pandemic. A lot of people, you see a lot of homeless people for sure. Sometimes it can be a nuisance. So that is little bit of a challenge living in downtown. But having said that, I think it's a pretty good city to live in. I do like it. But it took me some time to start liking it.
Getting accustomed to it. But that's also because
Yeah.
you were spoiled. You moved from Dubai. Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
Dubai is definitely much, much more clean than Toronto.
glamorous is
Glamorous,
more.
yeah, but I do love the nature aspect here.
Yeah, I
There's a lot
think
of
that part about Dubai
nature-related
being a
activities.
concrete.
Yeah.
Sorry, please go on. You were saying the nature related activities were nicer, are nicer.
Yeah, so there's a lot of parks here. People focus a lot on mental health. So there's a lot more activities to do here, people to interact with on the weekends and weekdays as well.
Whilst we touched upon it a little now, since you've lived in Dubai and you've lived in Toronto for a bit, what are the pros and cons of both the cities and what would you prefer and why?
Dubai, of course, is much more cleaner, as I said, and I think the lifestyle that you can afford in Dubai is much more glamorous than you could afford in Toronto for the same amount of money. Um, Living space wise as well, I think Dubai has much uh, bigger spaces. Toronto is a little bit like London in that matter, I would say. The spaces are much more uh, compact as compared to Dubai. But I think Toronto has its plus points because, more nature related activities, feels a bit more grounded. So if I were to pick between the two, long term, maybe Dubai.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could always move out to the suburbs in Toronto, and the spaces are bigger, and then you have so many options for parks and activities. So it really depends. I think a lot of people do really move back to the Middle East because family's closer. So those motivations also come into play.
Families closer, more disposable income, untaxed money. There's a lot
Of
of other
course.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think tax situation in the West actually can hit people hard, and I feel Canada and UK, for that matter, don't have the best tax brackets for how we get taxed.
Of
Um,
course. Okay.
so I know I jumped ahead a bit in terms of your career path. You, right after graduating, I know you were working for a local firm somewhere in Lahore, but then after having worked 6 to 7 months, you were directly selected to work in the Big Four in Dubai. Now, how did that come about? And how often or how frequent is that? And is that a route upcoming grads can take, or was it something that was exceptional in the moment?
I think it was more so an exception, not the norm. I mean, of course, LUMS has these agreements with a lot of companies that come in and recruit the graduating batches. But for that particular hiring, it was a one-off scenario where PwC actually was hiring for a specific project. And they reached out to the alumni office at LUMS, and they had a cutoff for like, I think 3.6 GPA. They got the resumes for 2016 and 27 batches from accounting and finance. So it was a
Right.
pretty specific filter that they had. And then, of course, they went through the resumes for people that made sense to them. They contacted us for interviews. They did the interviews in a single day. So they did 2 rounds in one day because it was like an expedited hiring process. And from that, 4 people were selected, out of which I was one of. So
Wow.
I would say it was a little bit of like having that privilege of graduating from LUMS and also my hard work of getting a good GPA. Um, but yeah, so that was a one-off process that they had for a particular project. And then of course it wasn't as easy as just that, okay, now you're here at PwC and you have a permanent job. They gave us a 1-year contract to kind of test us out. And based on our performance, then they made us a permanent employee. So that's how it panned out.
Okay. And so, see, now those were exceptional circumstances. Plus, you were on the dean's list, so it mattered a lot. And I presume how many out of how many people did they choose? 4 people?
It was about 20 plus people in the
Yeah, that's
interviews.
quite a bit
Yeah.
actually. Now, so you've had a different experience, obviously, and there's quite a few things you ticked before you were able to move into the Dubai market. Now, and I don't know if you will have all the facts for it, but let's say students who don't have this privilege and that do want to move into Middle East as their first international work experience sort of a location, what would you advise them? How do they go about it if they don't have these exceptional circumstances?
I think LUMS does have these partnerships with with companies in the Middle East, where you could take advantage of going to their sessions, learning a little bit about the roles that they're offering. But more so important, I think, is the networking aspect. So LinkedIn, of course, is a very good platform to use when you want to network with people, understand what roles are there. Reach out to the alumni network of whichever university that you've graduated from. I think that really helps. Because like even for me, if somebody from LUMS was to reach out to me, I definitely would have like a softer spot for them because it's the same university, like shared kind of like heritage, you could say.
Trauma?
Trauma as well. But I think networking is more important than ever now. And then cutting through that noise, I think, because even for me, if I were to say, like, I get a lot of notifications on my LinkedIn, a lot of requests. It's not humanly possible for me to accommodate all the requests. But of course, like, I do try to help out wherever I can. Sometimes it's also about a game of numbers. That you reach out to so many people, try to get some time with them, understand. They can put in a good word for you or give you a referral for a role that has come up. Uh, in the Middle East, I think now it's a bit more hard to get a job in Dubai because Dubai market is more saturated. Depends on what industry you're looking at, but if it's financial services, I think there's a tendency to just like hire from whoever is in Dubai and not from outside. There's also some political tensions there, so you kind of need to be mindful about that. Saudi, I think, is a much more booming market. There's a lot of
Yeah.
opportunities there. A lot of my friends have also moved to Saudi in very good positions. And of
Mm.
course, like, it takes time to kind of get into the door, but once you're there, then there's more opportunities that open up for you. So I would also say that if there's an opportunity that doesn't exactly line up to what you want, and if you really want to make that move to move to the Middle East, take that opportunity. And then once you're there in the market, then you have more opportunity to connect with people and get a much more aligned opportunity to what you want to do.
That makes sense. But for women or single women, would you advise moving to Saudi is an okay thing to do, or is it harder? Because or would Doha be a better option, or Dubai is the only place where they can go and like thrive?
I think as a single woman, I would also be probably more comfortable if I were to go to Dubai or Doha. But having said that, I haven't really explored opportunities in Saudi for single women. Um, you do have to be mindful that Saudi does have a little bit of a quota for their own people. So there's this whole Saudiization movement that
There's
happened a
also
few years ago.
Emiratization, Omanization.
Exactly. So there's a tendency to maybe not hire or maybe have a bias at some level. Um, but I haven't explored the market as a single woman. I haven't really applied for jobs. I would assume it's going to be relatively easy in Dubai and Qatar than in Saudi. Um, but I don't have the full information to support that
That makes
hypothesis.
sense. And also, but living alone, I don't know. To be honest, we keep hearing Saudi's really opened up, but we don't know how easy it is as a woman to live there. I don't have facts at hand.
I have visited Saudi because my brother lives there, so I've seen it's a much more open environment for sure.
Right.
Um, than I would have expected, or maybe I was going in with a very conservative mindset. So maybe compared to that, I thought it was like relatively better. I have worked in Saudi on a project. I think I would say that even though it's not really said out loud, there is that tendency that as a woman, you have to work harder to prove yourself and to be taken seriously, especially in client meetings, than than a man.
Yeah.
I know the world is progressing. I know that there are efforts to have more women in the workforce. Um, but I think it's a long way to actually internalizing that than we are right now.
There are certain companies there that actually don't allow women in their offices or have like segregated floors from what I remember or I hear. And in the news, you hear it's all hunky dory and Saudi's having these concerts and all these Western singers are going and, they're attracting a lot of investment. There are all these visions they keep releasing. But I know like there are these little components or parts there that still need to be, I guess, finessed for women to make it easier. But then thinking about what rights women had like even 50 years ago, we've come a long way. And I think every jurisdiction is moving at its own pace.
Yeah. Definitely remember having a designated floor for women on my client. So I've been through that process. It is a bit challenging because connecting with people, like really making your mark, and proving yourself becomes harder when you put into that shell, right? That you cannot get out of. Um, so then efforts, I think, need to continue. Um, And it's funny we would think of these things more so in the context of maybe the Middle East, or maybe like not issues, but behaviors in a country that's more conservative, in a market that's more conservative. But there are some elements of that even in the Western world, which is assumed to be a bit more developed, more open. And even though it is, there are these certain nuances that you notice on a day-to-day basis that do make you feel like there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to include more women in the workplace.
I fully agree. I think as a woman, our journey is quite a bit harder. And I know we get a lot of flack for it, for being called feminist, what have you. But A, the people who are making a noise, and I don't want to call out a specific gender, but what I'm saying is they've not experienced being us. So some of the things that we are saying or we do experience, they can't fathom experiencing that. There's a lot of things that are stacked up against us. However, we are still far more privileged compared to our moms or grandmoms. We're living the kind of lives they couldn't even imagine, give or take 20, 30 years
Of
ago.
course.
I constantly get to hear that, we've given you this liberty. And to be honest, the places we come from, it's true, right? Like that is also a privilege that you and I tend to ignore in our day-to-day lives. But
Course,
it's not about
there's a
guilty.
lot of
Yeah.
small struggles that have gone into us sitting here. So I do acknowledge that.
Small
And I
or even
think
big. I think our moms
it's
having strong
small, I think
matriarch.
sometimes big, sometimes, most of the times, it's, I think, small, consistent efforts. Um, Not to give like very specific examples, but a lot of people in Pakistan, even if they come from very good families, still do believe that, oh, there's only a certain level to which a woman should be educated, because maybe beyond that, it makes it difficult for her to assimilate into that idea of what a good woman
Right.
should be in the society, you know? Um, so slowly, gradually, we're probably trying to detach ourselves from that identity. Um, but even getting to this point, I think it's a lot of effort that the generation of our moms have done on a day-to-day basis, standing up for what they believe, standing up against family members, going against their wishes, which of course it's not easy to do. Um, and some very subtle efforts which might have not even been heard or noticed that they've done over the years that have enabled us to be in that position. And I feel like that puts more responsibility on us to continue that trajectory and have women of the next generation have more independence than we have, and maybe not have faced those issues that we currently do. And even though those issues might not be as big as what our mothers have faced, I do believe that we still have our fair bit of challenge that we do have to experience in the workplace and the society as a whole.
That's true. You can work 10 times harder. Your journey could have been a lot harder, but I think men or boys get away with a lot. Like the standards for them, if the standard for us is here 500% on the same front, it could be 100% for them. We'd get marked up against this, and they'd get marked up against this. And then somehow we've normalized that boys mature later. Excuse me, that's not what it is. We just make more leeway for them or more excuses for them because they're boys. And that's just how, like, they grow up. And then, anyway, fact of the matter is the world has always functioned to support them more. It's only now, the last 20, 30 odd years, you're seeing more women in STEM. But for you to be able to get to a certain level in your career, and your voice being heard compared to men, you have to be of a very strong stature. Or to be able to get yourself heard, you have to work 10 times harder and get your point across.
Yeah, definitely. I think everything else remaining consistent. If if I was a man coming from the same experience, same background, maybe my journey would not have been that challenging. Um, I mean, of course, like it's all subjective at the end of the day.
Right.
If I compare it to somebody else, maybe my journey is not that challenging. But I do think there's a certain natural barriers that we have to overcome, and then of course there's some like man-made barriers that we have to overcome to be taken seriously. If those were not in our place, maybe it would be a smoother trajectory upwards. But I do feel like women who've been in the workforce before us, there are certain established women sitting in like my leadership in my company and like leadership in other companies. There is a conscious effort that's being made to make lives easier for women in the workplace.
Nice.
But there are certain inherent biases that I still think need to be overcome. It's a long way to actually like integrating that mindset in people, men and women equally, actually. So it's not just men who would create those barriers for women in the workplace. I've seen women do that as well.
Yeah,
So I think there's a long way to go to actually, like, whatever we are saying, we need to kind of internalize that. I don't think it's at that stage where it's really been internalized. People are trying, but the efforts still need to continue.
that's very true. And I think with any change, especially when it's like generations or centuries long, it takes time, right? I think, and then that's also coming from the fact that I do personally know you, but I think from where you're sitting or where I'm sitting, half of our journey was made easier because we had strong matriarchal characters in our lives, which again is rare. Speaking of privilege, I think yes, there are moms who go through a lot of struggles and a lot of fights and what have you, but I do feel like having a strong matriarchal character or a strong woman to look up to sort of made our journey easier because A, we had those sort of examples to look up to, but B, half our battles were fought by them, battles that we didn't even get to hear of or know of what they've been fighting in the background.
For sure. I don't think I would have been here if it was not for my mom. Apart from being a role model for sure. I think she has definitely fought a lot of battles for me, some of which I don't even know. Um, and then also like my extended family, like I have three sisters who really support me, guide me when I'm probably not in the going in the right direction, try to keep me grounded. So I think it's really, really important to have like strong women in your life that really support you and they do want to see you succeed, whether it be your family, whether it be like the woman that you surround yourself with on a daily basis. I think it's really important. I don't think men understand that concept too much, but I think having that in your life for a woman is very, very important, because unfortunately the struggles that we face, because the other gender is not able to relate, they're not able to understand. So only women can really understand where we're coming from, even if it's like a small thing.
Yeah.
To be able to go back and discuss that and get some advice, which is good advice, genuine advice, I think is very important, especially like personally for me, it's very important.
I have very few questions, but I want to touch upon them. Um, One is, has your career in the Big Four turned out to be as it was marketed? And what would you advise upcoming people if they're aiming to get into the Big Four or big organizations, let's say big banks even? What would you advise would be the next step for them or how they should go about it?
One of the things that's very known about Big Four is the work-life balance might not be that great. So I think marketing in that perspective has been spot on. Definitely like a lot of long hours that we have to put in sometimes, or most of the times, if I were to say. But then at the end of the day, I think it is rewarding if you have a good team to work with. There's a lot of good exposure in Big Four. The kind of projects that I'm working on and the kind of clients that I work with, their seniority and their technical expertise is something that I probably would not be able to get if I was working maybe in a bank itself, because you have to start small and then just grow from there. So definitely, if you're a driven individual who doesn't mind putting the extra hours, um, then I would say definitely it's a pretty good industry to start with as well. Um, Good exposure, and you get a lot of opportunities to build your personal brand. Um, but having said that, for people who are entering the Big Four right now, the model is changing quite a bit. Be it because of AI, just generally like the world economy. I think there's a lot of focus on people who can add value. So
Mhm.
coming in with the niche expertise or something that you add to the table is very important now. You have to be able to like live and coexist with AI. So then your personal brand, your personal expertise comes into play. Um, and coming with a finance background, I don't know if I should say this or not, but people who come from more technical degrees, let's say engineers, I've seen a lot of people enter consulting from engineering because, niche consulting is now very in the market, solving specialty kind problems, because
Yeah.
even clients are becoming very conscious about where they spend their money. So if I go back to PwC, the kind of projects that we used to do back there, some of it is, of course, like it's not going to go away. Some of it's regulated. So banks, for example, have to go for an audit. Banks have to go for some internal controls testings. That is not going to change much. It might evolve into a different model. You might not need too many people for it. But then when you come to management consulting, everything is up for grabs, right? There's so much changes. And I think consulting firms are right now trying to even envision where they would sit. And then there's a lot of niche consulting firms that are coming into play that have a really specific focus of solving client problems. So think about the kind of problem that you could probably solve for a client. If you were to sell yourself and be like, oh, pitch to a client and what problem can I solve for them? Would they buy that or not? Given that there's AI and they can chat GPT, put a problem in chat GPT and get an answer. So then
Yeah.
where does your value come in is very, very important these days. And then, of course, working on those skills as well. Maybe taking extra courses apart from university. So, yeah, I think it's becoming increasingly important to know the direction that you want to go in so that you can enter like a specific team within the Big Four, because there's like so many different teams that you could be a part of, um, to really succeed in the industry.
That's very true. And on that, like you're obviously in the throes of AI explosion, and I'm the same. But how have you navigated this, and how are you ensuring that you keep yourself upskilled and you, as a management consultant, stay top of your game, and clients do want to work with you or ask for you on their projects?
I think right now I'm trying to master the art of AI as well. So within the firm, there's a lot of push towards building reusable tools or reusable skills that can make the lives of other teams more efficient, more easy. So I'm trying to upskill myself on AI itself. There's so many things out there, so I'm constantly learning. Then, of course, like we work with banks and we try to understand what their problems are and how does AI fit in and what our value add would be. So the positioning to the clients now is not just, oh, we'll do this for you. Oh, we have these tools. We'll leverage AI. We'll leverage some reusable assets that we have. And then this is the add-on that we'll do, which you're not going to get from AI.
Right.
That's how you basically position yourself. So trying to work on both aspects, the AI aspect and then the technical aspect. Um, of course, that comes from experience as well. And then I think there's also that notion that even though there is AI, it's not like it's going to completely make consulting archaic. There's always going to be like an AI bot cannot come into a client and present. So you're still going to need people to do that. So striking that right balance, of where you want to focus on is where I'm trying to work on myself as well.
But when you say you're learning about AI, are you learning like the basics of prompts, or are you also learning how AI tools are developed, how the neural networks work? Is that something you want to segue into? Is that something that will help you? Or you're yet to think about how to position yourself fully?
I think right now I'm focusing more on the practical use of AI. So prompt, and of course, is one aspect of it. Then I think I mentioned it briefly, like developing skills in AI.
Yeah.
So just to give you like a very small example, in consulting, whenever we have meetings, we have to make minutes, right? And then
Yeah.
circulate with the team. And initially, it used to take us like half a day to first have a draft and review it with somebody. Then you get feedback, and then it would take a day or two process to kind of actually publish those minutes. Now, of course, you can use prompting to do that, just put in your notes. But then the better way to do that is to have a skill developed in AI where, for example, if I'm working in a particular client, they're used to having their minutes drafted in a way. There's certain sections, there's certain formats that you have to follow. So you put that into the tool. You give it a very specific prompt that you want your notes to be turned into these sections. The language should be this, the length should be this. So once you like put in that effort to define that skill in the first place, you don't have to repeat doing that. So initially what I used to do is like every time I used to make minutes for a steering committee, I used to give it a prompt to write it again and again. But then now I've shifted towards developing that skill first and then using it to make the minutes.
Leverage it again and again.
Leverage it again and again. So like that way I don't have to spend 30 minutes every time I have to make meeting minutes prompting AI to, give me the output in a certain way. I've just done the work up front and now I'm
Hmm.
just using it as a tool, input, output.
It's like a
So
little assistant.
exactly, exactly. So that's like a very small example. Then, of course, like if you club certain skills together, you can make an AI agent out of it, a bot, or uh, it's called, the name is skipping me. But essentially, it's about, starting small and then actually learning the extent to which you can use AI and what all it can do. But
Yeah.
personally, apart from like work, I'm also trying to like understand. For example, if I were to like launch a product and I want a website to be made, there's so many different free trials out there that I could use to build a website, even though I don't know
Hmm.
anything about coding. So personally, like trying to learn personally as well as professionally on how better to use AI. Um, but on the technical side, trying to look for some courses that help me, understand the market a bit better in the context of today's world.
Right. That makes sense. You worked a couple of years, you've traveled countries, you've established yourself. How much does spirituality or belief in God come into play with this? How much weightage did it have? And do you think it's always that you leave everything to God, or there's some onus on you or on us to do some due diligence or some hard work to get somewhere in life? Um, and if you had to give me and the wider audience a message as to how they can incorporate spirituality or how important it is, please go for it.
Okay. Um, so there's no doubt in the fact that if you want something, you definitely have to work towards it. You're not going to get anything sitting at home and just praying for it, for sure. Um, but beyond praying for something, one thing that I've worked on for the past few years has this power of manifestation. I know it's talked about quite a bit. I'm not an expert on it, but one thing from my personal experience that I've seen is that for to achieve something, you really have to believe that you just do it. Putting that energy out into the new universe that you do believe in yourself is very important. Because if you're going with the energy that, oh, I don't think this is going to happen for me, but oh, you know what, I'm just going to try to work on it still, you're not really putting in that effort, or you're going with the mindset that, oh, this is not going to happen, so then it
Hmm.
does not happen, so it becomes into like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's like
Right.
a loop. Even if you work towards something, if you're working towards it with the mindset that, oh, it's probably not going to happen, the kind of effort that you put in would be very different than the effort that you would put in thinking that, oh, you know what, I'm going to make this happen. So the approach, or the mental kind of approach that you take towards anything, really matters. So I think that's where the spirituality comes in. That's where your manifestation comes in, the belief in God that, oh, you know what? I'm going to work towards this thing, and God willing, this is going to happen for me because I'm putting in the positive thoughts, I'm putting in the effort. So God is going to make this happen for me. But then also having that belief that, oh, if this specific thing doesn't really work out in the way that I would want it to work out, there's still something better out there for me. So one example that I can give is when I graduated, I got a few job offers. One of them was from Karachi, but my family didn't let me take that job offer at that point in time. And I was really mad about that because it was a good job offer. It was a good pay. It would have been a good experience. And that really upset me for quite some time because I wasn't able to take that offer. Fast forward a few months, when I got that offer from PwC, it was because I was in Lahore at that time. Had I been in Karachi, I wouldn't have been able to come for the interview. I wouldn't have got that job, and my life trajectory would have been very different. So, going back to the thing, I did always want to work in a good company. I worked for it, but I also left some things or some positive vibes out there that, oh, you know what? Whatever happens, I know it's going to work out for me. I'm just going to continue working towards my goal, and I know that this will happen for me. I think that really made a huge difference. So my recommendation will also be that easier said than done. But I think you really have to believe in yourself before anybody else believes in you.
That's very true. And I think you didn't even realize where you've also touched upon some of the battles as a woman you've had to face. So not being allowed to go to Karachi, but like imagine if it had to happen, they agreed to the fact that you can move to Dubai for your job, right? But
Yeah.
self belief is very important, and I feel till date, wherever I've landed, my confidence or the vibe I give from self belief perspective, it's always helped me quite a bit. But you're right, on the flip side, I put in a lot of effort and I come to a stage where I'm like, I've done everything I can. And if I still don't get something, I won't have any regrets. And I know that God didn't want this for me.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's a realization people have too late, or that balance is very difficult, especially from the origins we come from. Um, there's a big percentage of people who think they just deserve something on a platter. Now, I don't know. I'm sure it might be a worldwide thing. I'm just speaking from where I grew up. I know things are changing, but I think that's other than self belief, that ability to be responsible for yourself is something that not everybody has.
At the end of the day, you have to take responsibility for your life. If you're not putting that effort, then you cannot really blame anybody else. But yeah, like effort with the belief that things are going to work in your favor really makes a difference.
Yeah, and practicing manifestation or manifesting positive thoughts. I struggle with that. I'm a very cynical person. That aspect also like trickles down onto me, but I'm trying to learn. It's a lifelong process. But Aska, lastly, I think I just want to touch upon finances. So in the current economic times, relying on a single salary and how things are getting expensive, we saw things shot up post pandemic. They're getting worse, and then I don't know where we're headed from here. But how do you work out your finances? Obviously, you live in downtown Toronto. It's not the cheapest. So, if you had to advise, especially women, we don't have much women representation, brown women representation in this domain. What would you advise? How do they navigate their salaries? How do they think about investments, savings? And also, from your personal experience, as you've grown, how has your mindset or attitude towards money, how has it changed? And are you looking at things differently?
Yeah, so I think saving has been a big aspect for me. It initially helped me save enough so that I was able to come and do my master's here. Had I not saved enough, I probably would have struggled a bit around that. So I think budgeting definitely is really helpful in that sense. It also might come from a traditional mindset where, you know, we've seen our moms budget quite a bit, whether it be like for house expenses, for otherwise. So I feel like it's more important in today's world because the way that things are going, I would be more comfortable having a buffer than not
Yeah.
having it in the first place. But also like if you have some personal goals, then working back from them. So if I want to buy a property in a year, I need to see how much money I need to have saved by that time, and then I need to have a plan for that. So I think one thing that's changed over years for me is trying to think long term in terms of, oh, you know, would I want to invest in something big? What would that investment be? When am I making that investment? And then kind of working back from it. Um, of course, there's some things that if you're employed, then your employer would help you with some pension, retirement savings. All of that contribution does come in. But I think I've become a bit more conscious about that. It's not just about saving a portion of your salary anymore. It's also about, you know, do you want to build any assets? Traditionally, I've just seen, you know, people from my country buy a lot of gold as a value, but I think that concept probably is now changing as well. You have so many options out there. If you're interested in the stock market, then there's options. Um, it also depends on how risk averse you are as a person. I'm a bit risk averse, so I haven't really invested in equities. I tend to invest a little bit more on through my um employer, through like some retirement savings and all of that. But I think I'm definitely working towards buying an asset. Especially if I have to be in Canada, definitely I think it's a good time to buy property. So I'm looking into that. It really depends on what your preference is. There's so many options out there. And then I think investing has become easy for people who are not institutional investors over time. You have stable coins, Bitcoin, you have different forms of assets coming in if you're interested in looking at that. So yeah, definitely a lot of options, but I would definitely suggest working towards a goal um uh of saving or owning something for women. I think it's very important for women in our society to have that financial independence. Even if you make the wrong decision, you learn from it. It's very important to make those decisions because for the longest time we have not, and I feel like now is the time to at least start owning a little bit of our money.
To your point, I agree. I think it's not talked about much, but financial independence is so important, especially for women. Um, the reason being, a lot of women before us, I saw a generation before us, were um, putting up with things they shouldn't have because they didn't have the financial means to get out of it. And I'm sure in this day and age, there is a big percentage of women still going through it. Talking about unspoken or silent or transfer or privileges again, I think we're privileged enough that we have that independence. And honestly, having finance or buffer or something of the sort has kept us away from making some really bad decisions in our lives, right? Um, it's only when you have it, you understand the power of it. Until we were taught this or told about this in theory, I didn't understand it. But when I have it, I know that any behavior or any personality or anybody I don't want to put up with, money gives me that freedom or that leverage to be able to go and start over. Um, and it's something so small that we don't notice. Like, even if it's a few £100 or a few hundred Canadian dollars that we're saving, at least it's like our emergency fund that can help us start over as and when. You touched upon buffer. What would you consider a good buffer? Is it like emergency fund saved up for 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses? Like, what would be a good buffer to have?
I think it will be different for different people, depending on your like how much you earn right now, how much realistically you're able to save based on your expenses. For me, I think I try to save like 30 to 40% of my salary. I don't think I always succeed, but I try. Budgeting is a bit of a challenge for me sometimes, especially because I do love traveling. So sometimes I tend to spend more in a month if I'm traveling somewhere. But especially one thing that's been recurring in my mind recently because I've seen a lot of layoffs. So I think a good buffer would definitely be at least 3 2 months of salary. Like over time, you kind of like build towards that so that in case you're in that position where you have to survive, then you're able to have that buffer. One good thing about being in a country where severance is a thing is, oh, if you're laid off, then you do have a buffer from your employer as well, until you can use that to find a new job, or you could just like, if you're trying to think of a business that you haven't really been having time to establish, you could probably just start thinking along those lines. But I think buffer would be different for different people. There probably is not a rule for it, but maybe 3 to 4 months of salary is like a good enough buffer to start with.
That makes sense. And then you said that, you try to budget. Do you use any Excels or tools or apps, or is it just a mental math that, okay, this much percentage of my salary is for my wants, this much is for my needs, and the rest I'll save or invest?
So initially, when I came to Canada, I did start an Excel for it, just trying to keep track of my expenses. Now that has become more of a mental math for me, but I know people who've actually built like proper Excels of like allocating, like, this much is going to go into rent. I'm going to have this much for my personal spending, this much for groceries. So if you really want to budget, I think Excel or like there are certain apps that you could use that could really help you do that as well. Depends on how strict you are as a person in terms of your spending. But also have like a little bit of like, you know, fun buffer. for
I
every month,
agree.
because like sometimes if you want to like overspend, you have that, and if you don't, then you just keep it.
There has to be a wants or a leisure bucket always.
It
Is
has
that
to be, yeah.
there has to be that balance to give us that sanity.